Thanks. Are we good with the mic? Is it? Sweet.
Check.
Okay, so an IT manager and a PM walk into a bar.
No, wait. We agreed to have one joke. That was not the one. Give him a break.
I had to, sorry.
He's new to this. My name's Aron. I'm a product lead at Dropbox, and I work in the HelloSign line of business. We do e-signature. But I didn't join Dropbox kind of the traditional way. I joined through an acquisition. And I've been at HelloSign for quite a while, actually. I joined back in 2013. We were about 10 people, and grew to 180, got acquired by Dropbox. It's been quite a ride. And while the challenges we've faced throughout that period have changed, one principle has not, which has served me well throughout the entire time, which is know your users and know your problems, know their problems. And the big user which I focused on a lot was kind of the end user, the person using the product. But increasingly, as our company grew and we kind of tried to get more upmarket, I became aware of a different type of a user who was unfamiliar to me until I met Alex.
And my name is Alex. I was the first IT manager at HelloSign about 4 years ago. And I grew the department from just me to being fully integrated with the global Dropbox team. And scaling a company from 0 to a couple hundred employees is a pretty wild ride. And interestingly enough, as we were scaling HelloSign internally, we were also moving upmarket externally with HelloSign. So in many ways, I kind of became Aron, a perfect representation of Aron's gatekeeper into the enterprise within HelloSign. And now that we're part of Dropbox, we really have this interesting viewpoint as well. But we found this interesting partnership at HelloSign between product and IT. And we found a lot of interesting things.
I'll never forget when there was a time when we were doing our quarterly road mapping, and Alex said something to me that hit me like cold water in the face.
So if I were evaluating HelloSign today, we wouldn't purchase it. And actually, we would go as far to block it if a business unit came to IT and said, we want to buy this product.
So as a PM, you can't ignore something like this. And I was really confused. I mean, we had tons of raving fans. We had an amazing user interface, all this great functionality. We had an API. I mean, what's not to love?
But when you're managing 100+ SaaS apps, from the IT perspective, if one of those services doesn't conform to the rest of the management principles, it's just a hard no. So one example is we use Okta as an IDP at HelloSign so that we can manage onboarding and offboarding for users. And if a product doesn't have the capability for single sign-on, it's just a hard no. Unless if there's a huge differentiator in the product that would make us want to make an exception, IT is going to block it all the time. Because if it doesn't have some of our requirements, it could even be as far as a compliance exception for us to onboard that product.
So I realized I was getting some privileged information here, kind of an inside look into the elusive mind of the IT decision maker in his native habitat. But I wasn't the only person who was trying to get a piece of Alex's time. Around the same time period, I noticed he had a whole bunch of unread text messages, and I was like, whoa, somebody's popular.
So yeah, all these software vendors are always like blowing up my phone right at the end of the quarter, trying to get their foot in the door.
So it took me a while, but I finally figured out a way to get Alex to spill all his guts. Turns out he has a soft spot for pina coladas at the Pagan Idol. Only took about 6 of them to learn roughly the following. So the explosion of cloud software is both a blessing and a curse for somebody like Alex. It's a blessing because it allows his team to do more with less, if it's done right. And it allows his company and his users to be more agile and to give them more choice to use the best of breed tool that they want to use. But it's a curse because while smaller software installations, smaller SaaS installations at companies tend to be self-run and self-managed by the end users themselves, if those software products are to grow within the organization, ultimately IT ends up taking them on. And what that means is another user directory to manage, another potential vector for a software or data breach, another exploration into the multitude of use cases.
You're making me sweat over here going into all of this.
Well, you know it better than I do. So while Alex is unlikely to impede a small-scale SaaS usage at a company, and by the way, that's a great way to get your foot in the door, to kind of go from the grassroots and to get the end users to self-sign up. Before he's ever going to greenlight a big contract or a big sale, he's going to want to run through a laundry list of things, and he's not going to be thinking about the end users. He's not going to be thinking about, are they going to be satisfied or getting their job done, or how effective are they going to be. That box is already checked. He's going to be thinking about his team and how he can manage SaaS at scale.
So what are the must-haves for enterprises in small SaaS products?
Well, we're going to break it down for you in terms of what we think are the 6 quickest wins and the things you really should be focusing on to cut through the noise.
Yeah, so the first one is automated user management. I kind of already touched on this, but this is absolutely critical for larger enterprises. Oftentimes, there's security and control compliances in place that require timely provisioning new users and especially timely deprovisioning of users. In addition, when you have hundreds of applications, there has to be automated ways for managing users. Small IT departments just can't have all these manual processes for onboarding new users and offboarding in another SAML or another SaaS app. So we recommend starting with single sign-on and just-in-time provisioning. So what just-in-time provisioning allows you to do is create a new user account the first time someone SSOs into your service. So it can be super enticing to, just-in-time provisioning, and then, so it can be super enticing to build complex integrations with different SSO providers. So you might hear a customer say, like, oh, well, we need SSO for Okta. But that's not actually what you should do. You should build a authentication flow for an open standard like SAML. SAML is the leading authentication standard right now today. And once you build that, now you can integrate with all the primary identity providers. So Okta, OneLogin, Ping Identity, Active Directory, Federated Services, Azure, AWS, all these things. And the only limit is how well you can talk to it. You can tell customers, well, we support SAML, so therefore we'll connect with your identity provider. Now, customers might also say that they need SCIM, API management framework that allows an API action to manage users, automatically provision new users, automatically deprovision users. It's incredibly complex to build on the product side and a ton of overhead. But you can actually get 90% of the functionality with just-in-time provisioning, which we just talked about, and then also a strong, robust SAML control set. So saying that you'll only allow logins from SAML or your SSO provider, you can now say to the customer, oh, well, if you disable their SSO access, they now no longer have access to the product, and you don't actually need to deactivate the user in our service. You can do that, and you don't have to have any of that overhead of the API framework and everything. You just have to be able to talk to it. And SAML also provides the benefit of the upsell. With just-in-time provisioning, users can automatically be onboarded into your service, and then that gives you a frictionless way to go back to the IT department and say, hey, you have these users using the service now, let's upgrade your contract. And also, supporting SAML is mutually beneficial for you and SSO providers. So there's a ton of documentation and framework that's already out there. For example, OneLogin has an SDK in multiple languages for building SAML into your product.
So by the time you get to the point where you're trying to win over somebody like Alex, you may have also at some point considered selling your product in other countries. And you may have decided that you thought it would be too difficult. Well, if you're going to sell to a larger organization, the thing is they're going to do an analysis to decide if anybody within either that office or another branch or another office has the need to have internationalization built into that product. And this can potentially become a showstopper. So let me kind of break this down for you a little bit. First of all, you may have seen some of these terms and not been fully clear on what they mean or what they represent. The first one to know is internationalization. It's often abbreviated as I-18N. Internationalization is an umbrella term. It includes everything from achieving legality and regulation requirements in other countries. It could potentially mean data residency, accepting different currencies, having support offerings in different countries, all of that. And another piece of I-18N is localization. Localization is abbreviated L10N. Localization is a fancy term for translations. It literally just means the product is available in different languages. And localization is what we think is the biggest win here. It's often what is considered to be the most important aspect of the internationalization umbrella. So, okay, translations. Well, maybe you still think that's too difficult. It doesn't actually have to be. You can find a translation service, and one that I've seen that I think is pretty good is Smartling. This translation service will offer an API as well as some scripts. What an engineer has to do is go into the code, find every place where there's a string that's going to get presented to an end user, wrap it in like a helper function, which is just a couple of lines of code, and then when that code gets committed, the script will use that helper function to pull all of the strings, put it through the translation service, and create a manifest file, which has all of the translations within it. So with that, you can integrate into your continuous integration, your continuous deployment process, and boom, every time an engineer from that point forward commits code, any of the strings will get translated. And the great thing about this is it's just as easy to get one translation as it is to get 10 or 12. So the other thing that you may want to consider in terms of some extra effort is kind of the QA phase. You'll definitely want to test your product in these different languages. In particular, I'd recommend you pay attention to input and output. So anywhere you have fields, keep in mind those fields are going to have different languages typed in, sometimes different character sets. So you'll want to confirm that your application supports ideally Unicode characters. And another recommendation is right-to-left languages can add a little bit of extra complexity here just because of the visual appearance of them. So you might just want to skip those or save them for a phase 2 to simplify things. And on the data residency question, this can also, especially if you're looking at the European market, become a showstopper. And you might hear that in France they want a France data center, or in Britain they want a data center in London. It's potentially a shortcut if you could just set up a cloud in Germany using like AWS or something, and that will be considered much, much better than having the data in the US, whom for some reason nobody trusts.
And this kind of pains me to talk about as someone that has to manage security and compliance today. But security and compliances really are like no joke. They do take an org-wide approach to achieving them, but also maintaining them. Just remember, if you do end up building a security compliance, you do have to conform to them after you build it too. And there's literally hundreds of compliances out there, and many of them are extremely niche and industry specific. But oftentimes larger companies will have a list of compliances they're okay to accept. And the reason for that is big ones like PCI and SOC 2 have overlap. For example, like SOC 2 and HIPAA actually both have controls for onboarding and offboarding employees. So even if HIPAA is designed just for medical records, having the controls proves you have a semblance of what's going on in your org. So if you do have a compliance, or you are following one of them, I'd learn to talk to it, because you might be surprised that a lot of the controls can be selling points in and of themselves, and you can show that the company is security minded. Larger enterprises oftentimes will require that you have a security disclosure agreement, some sort of mechanism for accepting security notices. So highly recommend like a bug bounty program. Showing that you have a bug bounty program proves that you also have a process to actually handle the security incidences. In larger enterprises, this is like a major requirement. And they'll ask you these questions to see if you actually will do something after you get the alert. And if you're publicly saying with a service like HackerOne that you'll pay out a bug bounty, it sort of proves that you are going to do something about it. And if you do have these programs, I also recommend bringing them up proactively with customers. If you're really daring, you can actually invite customers to pen test your own product. And it can be very mutually beneficial. In an absolute best case scenario, you get free disclosure out of it, and hopefully nothing more.
Cool. So integrations. It's entirely possible that your product brings a ton of value just basically all by itself. It's a great standalone product, and you think that there's no reason why it would need to be integrated in anything else. But as you move up market, there's going to be somebody in some department who feels like they want some functionality into the tool that they're already used to using. The problem here is that all these different organizations have lots of different tools. Some people use Workday. Some people use Greenhouse for HR. Some people use Salesforce for CRM. Some people use HubSpot. So you've got a big fragmented market. And the other problem with integrations is they take a lot of time and energy to build in-house. You've got your engineering team who has to ramp up on this new platform, understand how it works, and even when they build it for the first time, it's not done. There's going to be maintenance. So that stuff can pile on top of one another. It can quickly become a rabbit hole. So approach integrations with care. My number one tip here is to, as much as possible, religiously track what customers are asking for. So on the sales calls, have a specific area where you keep track of, are people saying no to deals because you don't have an integration with this product or this other product? And that way you can look holistically in aggregate, where is the greatest signal coming from, and is that worth owning an integration with that particular product to try to remove that potential sales deal breaker. The other thing is that some people think middleware is like a panacea here. Like if you build into Zapier or MuleSoft or Pegasystems or Nintex or name your favorite middleware, there's lots of them, that just sort of solves the problem. It's a Swiss Army knife. Well, that's not quite true. It can help, but it's also a little bit of a red herring for a few reasons. One is that middleware will not help you change the UI in that third-party tool. So for example, if you need to have a button surfaced in Workday or have a custom user interface in Salesforce, and that's what customers are expecting, middleware is not going to help with that. And middleware also isn't going to be able to support every use case. There's often limitations around the format that it'll understand, or handling binary data or authentication a certain way. Trust me, you'll run into problems. So again, I would be cautious about that. The last point here is if you have an API with your product, this can actually be very beneficial to the integrations approach you take, because you can protect your core developers' time and outsource the development of certain integrations to a third party, like a system integrator or a developer shop. All the major ecosystems have tons of them: Google, Microsoft, Salesforce, Workday. There's shops that specialize in them, and if you can find them, you might be able to negotiate a great price just to get an integration and check that box.
And this one's actually my favorite.
Hey, Alex, where's the picture?
Great question. Lost. See, if we had an audit log, we could find out where it went. But sometimes these are viewed as unnecessary. But
press the button again.
Oh.
No, go back. It's fine. Go ahead.
It didn't work.
It's okay. Just go.
Yeah, we got it. So this is sometimes a bone that I'll throw to products that I really like and might not have some functionality. So admin audit logs are always looked as kind of unnecessary, but they can actually be a back pocket trick for you. Logging admin actions can sometimes be good enough if you don't have robust security controls in place. So if you don't have granular permissions inside your app, you can usually talk to the point of saying that, well, we don't have a way to limit admins from taking this function, but we will log it if they do. And a lot of IT departments actually will take this compromise and say it's okay. That's for the front-facing admin logs. But it's also important for your back-end audit logs that you have an ability to make sure they're tamper-resistant. So you don't want your admins to be able to have, or your DevOps team, infrastructure team, to go in and be able to modify these logs. You have to have some sort of system that you can talk to and prove that the logs are tamper-proofed on the back end. And being able to say those two things, that the customer can see these front-end admin audit logs, and on the back end they're tamper-proof, will be enough for you to be able to talk to, well, we don't have that specific control, but it's okay because we're watching them. But then in addition, having an incident response team is also critical to this. So larger enterprises will expect SaaS providers to be able to assist them in the event of an incident. I'm not talking about like security incidents, but like a customer doing something stupid in your service, and then you have to take an action to do something. It's much, much better to have that team already in place before an incident occurs. And this is also super helpful in the sales cycle too, to be able to say, well, we have an incident response team, we do these regular tabletops, we're ready in case something happens. And last piece is running tabletops quarterly, or however you want to run them, for incident responses are also hugely beneficial internal into the org too, besides just talking about them in the sales cycle. You might be surprised how much you'll find about your own product working with maybe some staff engineers if you don't have a large enough security team yet, or your customer support team, and go through different hypothetical scenarios around a table.
I always love that name, tabletops. It just sounds fun, like game night or something. Is it that fun?
I actually do find them kind of fun. I'm not saying that you should use money and gambling when doing a tabletop scenario, but it could be a little exciting.
Okay. All right, so the last one I would say is probably of the 6 the most that's sort of in the nice to have category, but it's just kind of having an API that can facilitate workflow. And the reason why this is important is Alex and his team, they're trying to streamline their job. They're trying to fit all of the stuff they do on a daily basis into the workflows that they already have. So the key APIs and workflows that they're thinking about are user onboarding and offboarding, audit log ingestion, and to some degree kind of piping data back and forth, and maybe some custom user workflow stuff. This really doesn't have to be that difficult to have an API. Most modern frameworks allow you to quickly create one. And there are some synergies as well. If you create an API for your product, remember you can use it for that integrations approach by having partners assist with integration development. And the last point is that if you're truly shooting for the enterprise customer, like the Fortune 500, you definitely will need an API. Most likely, they're going to be, you may even be partnering with like a global SI, like an Accenture or Deloitte to close those deals. And there could be some kind of a custom solution being packaged with yours amongst other products tied together with like a services bundle. So an API is pretty important there.
So those were the 6 pieces of advice, and we wanted to leave and end with 2 tales of woe of following our advice or maybe not following it that turned out differently. So going back to that security compliance recommendation, my tales of woe, what happened when we completed our SOC 2 and HIPAA audit, which don't do those together, it's a nightmare. But at the end of the audit, the auditor came and shook all of our hands and said, guys, this is the best audit we've ever had in our careers. You knocked it out of the park. And they walked out the door and all of us high-fived each other and was like, yes, we did it. Best audit ever. And then 3 months later, we realized there was no way that we could maintain all of those controls we put in place. And that's why the auditors liked it, because there was no gaps whatsoever. So then we spent the rest of the year winding back half of those controls to something actually maintainable. And our current CISO has a great line that I now repeat all the time and say, like, if a control isn't automatable, it's not a real control. Human controls don't count. And I'd say the best piece of advice on this is spend a little bit of extra time with auditors if you are doing a compliance framework, and explain to them your lighter weight process. A little bit more time with an auditor will probably end up saving you hundreds of hours throughout the year of maintaining an airtight control.
Cool. So my tale of woe is when we were working on the user management piece, and we followed exactly the advice that we gave here today. We started with SSO and just-in-time provisioning, which, if you recall, was the very first tip that we told you. But once we finished that, we should have stopped there. Unfortunately, we decided to go a little bit further. And I think the rationale here was we really wanted to go 110% and really impress the IT decision maker. And we also noticed that many other applications, SaaS applications, did not offer SCIM. So if you recall, SCIM, System for Cross-Domain Identity Management, fancy word for an API around user management. If you have that, then somebody like Alex can automate that most important workflow piece, which was the user onboarding and offboarding, into his identity provider, like Okta or whatever. And we just thought that since we didn't see many other applications having it, including some of our direct competitors, and the fact that we really wanted to impress the ITDM, we would just go all in. So we spent a lot of time working on it. In fact, it took an engineer so long that he ended up quitting before it was even finished. And it just ended up some hanging branch somewhere that we kept saying quarter after quarter, oh yeah, we'll get to that. Yeah, we're going to finish that up. Yeah, absolutely. Never happened. So not only did we basically burn an engineer's time for months, but we didn't get anything out of it. And to this day, we don't have it.
We actually lost the code. We don't even know where it is now.
And I don't know, I think it was like over pina coladas one day, and Alex was like, you know, like that's not even a requirement, right? And I was like, great, yeah, just make me feel even better about it. But I will say, I will caveat this, that this is kind of a fast-changing space and kind of getting an inside look. It may not be a hard requirement today, but these things are evolving and the standards are increasing and changing. And so this could be one of the things that's on the bubble that's not really a requirement today, but could be in the future. So I will salvage, try to save some dignity by saying that.
So I wanted to leave time for Q&A. I'll answer probably the first question on everyone's mind. We would buy HelloSign today for HelloSign. We've achieved this, so we're now happy customers of our own. But yeah, if anyone has anything they want to discuss, I have a couple talking points up there to suggest anything.
Yeah, what's up?
Yeah, I have a question. So I understand the list of priorities. I'm curious though, Alex, I hope it's not an insulting question. Like, how big really is your sway? Like, let's say Dropbox really wanted HelloSign and it had none of those things. Like, in your experiences, how much does IT really influence those decisions when it's clearly like the first choice of the primary users?
That's a great question. I probably would liken it to the same way that the president could influence like Congress or the Senate. Like maybe getting something through, not so much.
Which
but,
president? Okay.
No. We're not going to get political, but IT definitely has veto power for sure.
All right.
Especially if it comes down to having to have a compliance exception. Like if something's not going to meet the security requirements, like IT and security can just say no. And like no, put yourself in the CEO's position. No one's going to go against that. If it's like, no, like if we bring on this product, it's going to break like XYZ and we're going to have to do blah, 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 blah. Like there has to be a massive differentiator in the product to be able to have that compliance like exception or something like that. So yeah, IT definitely has veto power. Whether it's IT can suggest another product or something like that, probably not as much. But yeah, a surprisingly large amount.
Okay, that's great. Thanks.
Over here.
Sure. So question for both of you. I think on the flip side.
And there is a mic too.
Oh, sorry. Thank you. Hi. So question for both of you. I think as a product manager, this was super insightful just to understand more about that IT decision maker. So on the flip side, from your experience, how often do you wish you can work with your internal product team to say, hey, these are things we should build in as features and capabilities of what we're trying to sell to the end customer in anticipation of our clients' IT decision makers?
Well, I do more than wish. I mean, we do this stuff. And I think one of the key questions, though, is, and it's sort of a theme we've touched on, but it's like how much is enough and how much is taking it too far and potentially wasting cycles. And so we gave kind of an example of that where it's like building SCIM was probably too far, but SSO and JIT was necessary. So that's kind of the balancing act. And we continue to think about the ITDM, but we sort of do it in waves. So we might invest in functionality that we think would appeal to the ITDM for like a quarter or two, and then get it out the door and work on some other stuff and collect data and see like, okay, are we still losing deals in these bigger organizations? And if so, why? Like, what did we miss?
So tying back to like win-loss analysis, and if it's big enough of a pain point, then you ignore them.
Exactly, yeah. Cool. All right, well, thanks, everybody.